There is something strangely fascinating about lost games, but not lost in the sense that they've disappeared entirely, but the kind that quietly slip off storefronts, fade from memory, and become little time capsules of a very specific era. And today, we're taking a look at one of those games. A game that tried to bring one of arcade racing's most iconic franchises to mobile, right at the peak of early smartphone gaming. This is Ridge Racer Slipstream, released in December 2013 on iOS and February 2014 on Android. This was developed by Invictus Games and published by Bandai Namco. Now, if you've heard of Invictus Games, that's because these are the guys behind the Project Talk racing MMO that launched all the way back in 2008 and had a re-release back in 2019. Anyway, this was released to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Ridge Racer. Yeah, a mobile anniversary title, that should already tell you quite a lot. But is this just a cheap spin-off, or is there something actually here worth revisiting? Well, after spending some time with it, I've got a lot to say. So, my name is Kledge, and let's talk about the weird Ridge Racer mobile game. So, first of all, let's get a bit of context. By 2013, the Ridge Racer series was, well, in a bit of an odd place. The franchise had already seen its peak years in the late 90s and early 2000s, especially on PlayStation hardware, but by the early 2010s, things were quieter and, dare I say, rougher. We had Ridge Racer Unbounded in 2012, which tried to reinvent the formula with a more destructive, almost Burnout-style approach, and let's just say, not everyone was really thrilled about that. I've personally not played the game yet, but I will cover it at some point. Anyway, so instead of a big console celebration for the 20th anniversary, what we got instead was a mobile game. Now, to be fair, mobile gaming in 2013 was booming. This was the era where premium mobile games were still a thing. You'd pay a couple of quid up front, and that was usually it. Except, not quite, because Ridge Racer Slipstream launched at $1.99, that's pounds, and still had microtransactions. Yeah, that combination didn't sit right even back then, and it's aged even worse now. But we will get to that. Also, yes, I know that most big games have microtransactions as well, but that doesn't mean that they should. So let's start with the presentation, because honestly, this is one area where the game actually does a pretty solid job. The menus are clean, they're modern, and they're clearly designed with mobile in mind. Everything is laid out in a way that's easy to navigate with touch controls. Big buttons, clear icons, nothing too overly cluttered. There's a sort of sleek, slightly futuristic aesthetic going on, which fits Ridge Racer pretty well. It doesn't feel like a cheap mobile UI, it actually feels kind of considered. And most importantly, it's functional. You're not fighting the menus, you're not digging through endless sub-options, it gets you into races quickly, which is exactly what you want from a game like this. It's a small thing, but it does make a difference. Now, before we talk about the game modes and gameplay, if you haven't done so already, and you're a big fan of racing games, please consider hitting that subscribe button and tapping the bell for notifications to stay up to date with my future uploads. And if you want to be the first to hear about any upcoming projects, or win the occasional giveaway, then please consider joining my Discord server using the link in the description below. Anyway, let's talk about what the game actually offers. So in terms of content, the game keeps things fairly straightforward. You've got two main modes, Career and Arcade. Career mode is where most of your time is going to be spent. This is structured as a series of championships, each made up of different race types. You've got your standard races, where it's just you versus a pack of opponents, elimination races, where the last place driver gets knocked out at intervals, and time trials, which are exactly what they sound like. I don't think I need to explain that to you. It's not groundbreaking stuff, but it works. Arcade mode, on the other hand, is basically the same thing, just without progression. No unlocking, no upgrades, no long-term goals, you just jump in with what you've already unlocked, and race. And honestly, that's a nice option to have, especially considering some of the issues with the career mode that we'll get into later. Now let's talk about the most important part, how it actually plays, because this is Ridge Racer after all. And thankfully, it mostly feels like Ridge Racer. The driving is very arcadey, with a heavy emphasis on drifting. If you've played basically any Ridge Racer game before, you will still feel right at home here. Drifting isn't just encouraged, it is essential. You'll be sliding around corners constantly, chaining drifts together to maintain speed, and more importantly, build up your boost meter. Now, boost in this game works a little differently compared to something like, say, Burnout. It's not something you're constantly spamming, instead it builds more slowly, which means you have to think about when to use it. There's a little bit more of a strategy involved. You can't just hit boost every time it fills up and expect to win, because it might take you a while to refill that boost meter. But interestingly, you actually gain more boost if you drift while boosting. So there's this nice little risk-reward system where you're encouraged to push harder, take more aggressive lines, and really commit to your drifts. It's a simple mechanic, but it adds a little bit of depth. And then of course there's the big feature, the one that literally gives the game its name, slipstreaming. If you tuck in behind another car, you'll gain speed, allowing you to overtake more easily. But of course this does work both ways, your opponents can do the exact same thing to you. And honestly, this is one of the best parts of the game, because it adds tension. You're constantly aware of your position, not just in terms of placement, but actually in relation to other cars. Do you stay behind someone to build speed, or do you pull out early and risk losing that advantage? Do you defend your line, or do you try to break away? It creates these little moments of decision making that makes races feel more dynamic. And for a mobile racer, it's surprisingly engaging. Now, controls are where things get just a little bit mixed. The game offers several control schemes, which is pretty nice. You've got tilt steering, where you tilt your phone to turn the car, touch steering, where you just use your thumb on the screen or finger or whatever you want, and options for auto acceleration, auto braking, or even auto steering. It's clearly designed to be as accessible as possible. But in practice, I can imagine it was probably a little bit awkward. I haven't played loads and loads of mobile races in my time, so maybe I'm just not used to that control scheme. In my case, I was emulating the game and using a controller, which you'd think would be the best option, but even then, I found it surprisingly difficult to consistently initiate drifts. There's just something slightly off about the handling. It's not bad, but it doesn't feel as tight or responsive as the console Ridge Racer games. But then again, as a mobile game, I kind of didn't expect it to, and I imagine on an actual touchscreen it probably feels even less precise. It's playable, definitely, and I never really had any problems, but it never quite reaches that smooth, satisfying feel you'd want from a game that relies so heavily on drifting. Now we do need to address the elephant in the room, because this is where the game really shows its age. Progression in career mode is tied heavily to upgrades and unlocking new cars. Well, more specifically upgrades. And on paper, that's fine, but in practice, it's very much a mobile game from 2013. Upgrading your car takes real-world time. Buying a new car, yeah, you're going to have to wait 30 minutes or maybe more before you can even use it. And of course, if you don't want to wait, you can spend premium currency to speed things up. Wow. Which wouldn't be as big of an issue if the game was free to play. But it wasn't. You already paid for it. And that's where it starts to feel just a bit off. At first, it's basically not a problem at all. The early championships progress at a decent pace and you don't feel restricted. But as you get further in, everything slows down. The challenges get harder, but only because you haven't upgraded your car yet, so it's more waiting, more grinding. And the game is just gradually trying to nudge you towards buying that premium currency to speed up the experience. And then, in doing so, it chips away at the experience because the core gameplay is fun. but the structure around it keeps getting in the way. Obviously now the servers are down anyway because the game's long since been delisted, so if you are emulating this, there's literally no way to get around the cooldown times, because you can't even buy any of the currency anyway, but oh well. So let's move on to something more positive, because visually, this game actually holds up surprisingly well. For a 2013 mobile title, Ridge Racer Slipstream looks really good. The environments are vibrant, they're varied, and they have clean textures, the tracks feel lively, and there's a good sense of speed. Car models are solid as well. I mean, they're not incredibly detailed by today's standard, but more than good enough for the platform. In fact, this genuinely wouldn't have looked out of place on a handheld console at the time. It feels like a proper Ridge Racer game in terms of presentation. And that's something I think the developers absolutely nailed. And then there's the sound, because if there's one thing Ridge Racer is known for, other than arcade racing, it's the music, and thankfully that tradition continues here. The soundtrack is full of energetic, electronic tracks that fit the racing perfectly. It's the kind of music that just makes you want to go faster. As far as I can tell, all the songs in the game are all taken from Ridge Racer 7, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, the engine sounds are fine, there's nothing special, but they're serviceable, the tyre squeals are exactly what you'd expect, and there's an in-game commentator, though, and I'll be honest, she can get a little bit irritating after a while. At first it adds a bit of energy to the races, but over some longer sessions it does start to wear thin. But it's definitely not a deal breaker by any sense of the imagination.
Final lap. Someone's entering your slipstream.
So when the game launched, it received fairly positive reviews overall. The iOS version currently sits at a 76 out of 100 on Metacritic, with critics generally praising how well Ridge Racer has been adapted to mobile. And to be fair, that's a really valid point, because in terms of core gameplay and presentation, it feels like a proper Ridge Racer experience. However, both critics and players were quick to point out the same issues we've talked about. The grinds, the waiting times, the microtransactions. User scores were noticeably lower, sitting around 6.5 out of 10, which kind of tells the story. People liked the game, but they didn't like the way it was structured. So where does that leave Ridge Racer Slipstream? Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, the core of the game is genuinely enjoyable. The drifting feels good, the slipstream mechanic adds some nice depth, and the overall presentation is strong for a mobile title of its time. It feels like Ridge Racer, and that's not something every spin-off can claim. But on the other hand, the mobile mechanics really drag it down. The waiting times, the progression pacing, the constant reminder that you could spend money to speed things up. It all takes away from what could have been a really solid experience. And playing it now, years later, those elements feel even more dated. And yes, I know mobile games are still filled with microtransactions, but from a premium title like Ridge Racer, why? It's a snapshot of a very specific moment in gaming history, where developers were still figuring out how to balance premium pricing with free-to-play systems. And honestly, it's not a balance this game quite gets right. That said, I'm still really glad I played it. There's something cool about revisiting these delisted games, seeing what worked, what didn't, and how things have changed. And Ridge Racer Slipstream is a perfect example of that. A game with a very strong foundation, held back by the trends of its time. If it had been released as a straightforward premium title, without all the timers and microtransactions, I think it could have been something even more special. But as it stands, it's a fun, but flawed and very interesting piece of Ridge Racer history. I think if you're a fan of the series, you should definitely check this one out. Now before I finish up the video, I just want to give a quick shout out to Sonic and Sprunky Fan 14 for recommending the game for the channel in the first place, and also for helping me set it up and get it working, because I'm kind of technologically incompetent. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe and tap that bell for notifications to stay up to date with my future uploads. A massive shout out to my Patreon subscribers for the continued support, and all I really have left to say is thank you and goodbye.